Alright guys, well, first and foremost, happy Thanksgiving. Depending on when you watch this, look, I'm not even filming this on Thanksgiving, obviously, and it might not even reach most of you until Thanksgiving's passed. Damn it, we're gonna stay in the spirit. Now, let me ask you, what do you get when you take a fake, gory trailer from 2007's Grindhouse, stretch it to a feature length, and pack it full of even more gore? We have Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, the Turkey Day themed slasher that promises a feast of blood and scares, but ends up serving more filler than flavor. It's a film with moments of brilliance, a few clever kills, and some strong visual style, but it ultimately buckles underneath weak writing, unlikable characters, and a lack of genuine suspense. For younger horror fans looking for a fun time, this movie might be worth a look, but don't expect a Scream-level reinvention of the genre here. Before we get into that though, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Gage. I upload horror-related videos every week to my channel, ranging from rankings, reviews, reactions, all that, so if that interests you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you really just want to go that extra mile, hit the notifications bell so you'll never miss any video. My channel is in the home stretch for monetization, so any and all support is greatly appreciated. That all being said, and a spoiler warning, let's get into Thanksgiving. Starting with the story and setup, this movie takes place in Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of Thanksgiving. The story begins with a chaotic Black Friday stampede at Wright Mart, a superstore owned by Thomas Wright. The opening scene is pure pandemonium. Jessica Wright, Thomas's daughter, sneaks her friends Gabby, Bobby, Evan, Scuba, and Yulia into the store early, but when the frenzied mob realizes that they're being left out, they storm in and tragedy ensues. 3 people die, including a security guard, some random dude who just really wanted that waffle iron, and Amanda Collins, the wife of the store manager, Mitch. Meanwhile, Bobby, Jessica's boyfriend, gets his arm shattered in all the chaos. It's definitely a strong opening that sets the stage for carnage and chaos. It was filmed almost like a completely different movie, like a disaster film, and I can admire it being different than a traditional opening kill like most slashers. Following that though, we cut to a year later and the town is still reeling from the tragedy. Jessica and her friends, each complicit in the events of Black Friday, have moved on, or at least tried to. Bobby's left Plymouth altogether, only to return just in time for a new wave of terror. A masked killer donning a sinister pilgrim mask begins targeting those connected to the Wright Mart incident. His name, John Carver, a Thanksgiving-themed psychopath with a taste for theatrics. Now hopping into the characters, let's be honest, you won't remember most of these characters after the credits roll. Roth's cast is full of stock archetypes and unlikable personalities who exist primarily to be killed off in increasingly brutal ways. You have Jessica Wright, our final girl. Jessica is likable enough, but her character feels undercooked, and while she has a few clever moments, especially during the climax where she live streams the killer's confession, or packs the musket that she had to learn how to do when she was younger and is now finally able to put it to use, she's still not the kind of heroine that you'll be rooting for till the end. She's just kind of bland. Then we have Bobby, Jessica's ex-boyfriend and one of the film's red herrings. Bobby spends most of the movie looking suspicious and moody, only to nearly get framed for the killings by the real Carver. He's got some depth, I guess, because he's dealing with the injury he got from the Black Friday stampede, but we don't really care, to be honest. It's very surface level stuff. Then we have Sheriff Eric, who's played by the extremely handsome Patrick Dempsey, who also, spoiler alert, the big twist, is the mastermind behind the murders. Motivated by the death of Amanda Collins, who was both his lover and the mother of his unborn child. Look, while Patrick Dempsey delivers a decent performance, the twist is so predictable that it lacks any real impact. Moving into the friend group now, we have Gabby, who's played by Addison Rae. She's Jessica's best friend. Gabby's role is mostly to scream and look horrified. She survives, but not before spending most of the movie just kind of naggy towards her boyfriend, which, given who her boyfriend is in the movie, I can kind of see her side of things. She survives, and honestly, I'm kind of glad that she did because her character didn't get a ton to do in this movie, so it was nice to see that she survived and is already confirmed for the sequel that's coming up later next year. I'm kind of excited to see what they do with her character this time around. Then we have her boyfriend Evan, who meets his grisly end when Carver live streams his bludgeoning with a meat tenderizer. His death is shocking, but lacks any kind of emotional weight. This dude is a douchebag. Very little, if any, redeeming qualities. He can play football well, I guess. That's it. Then we have Scuba, who's pretty much the comedic relief who tries to help Jessica during the final showdown. He gets caught, but ultimately survives, which actually really shocked me. His character didn't really stand out too much at all. His acting was also pretty bad. Like, out of the entire friend group, I would say that his acting was probably the weakest. The characters that they picked to survive in the movie really makes me intrigued to see what they're gonna do with the sequel, because his character, Gabby's character, they're usually the type of characters that you see die first in these movies, so for them to survive is actually pretty surprising. Then we have Yulia, Scuba's girlfriend, and poor Yulia, she's disemboweled with a table saw in one of the film's most graphic moments, It's horrifying, but also feels gratuitous given her lack of development, and the fact that Jessica and Scuba just kind of stand there while she gets thrown onto this table saw. The gore and practical effects are great, but the scene itself is very, very bad. I will give points to the sequence whenever he stabs her in the ears with those like corn husk things. That was nice. It was really gross. I appreciated that. Then we have Ryan, who's played by that dude who's in all those zombie Disney movies. He's probably the most boring character in the friend group. The dude's just another red herring, sort of part of the friend group, but also not really. Kind of like Liv in Scream 5, he's just there to add to the suspect list and does virtually nothing. Kind of comes off like a douchebag and somehow ends up with Jessica by the end of the film. Oh, and not a friend, but a character that I almost forgot because again, just very cookie cutter molded characters these are. You have Kathleen Wright, Jessica's stepmother, who gets one of the film's most outrageous deaths. Carver literally cooks her alive and serves her as a human turkey at his macabre Thanksgiving feast. I'm not saying anybody deserves this kind of fate, like at all. It was horrific, but she deserved this fate. She was one of the worst characters in this movie.
It is going to be a very happy Thanksgiving.
I was not sorry to see this happen. I really wasn't. Speaking of the kills though, if you're a gorehound, Thanksgiving delivers in spades. Roth knows how to stage a memorable kill, and the film's set pieces are dripping with creativity. I included some highlights, such as Lizzie's death, the lady that works at the diner, the ridiculous dumpster death scene where a fully grown adult is bisected by a dumpster. Okay. Then you got the security guard who has a pretty cool decapitation effect. I'll give it that. Nice practical gore effects. Then we have the trampoline scene where the dude in the scene actually got a death, unlike in the trailer version. The cheerleader death was fine, where she's jumping on the trampoline and then lands on the knife. Some people were annoyed that it was slightly different, but given how it plays out in the trailer, I'm kind of happy that I wasn't subjected to something like that. Following that up, we have the table saw scene with Yulia. Like I said, her death is gruesome and shocking, but it's hard to care about her fate when her character is just so underdeveloped. I mean, there's just very, very basic development here. It's just not really enough to actually give a shit that she falls on a table saw. I don't care. Then you got the human turkey. Kathleen's death is both horrifying and somewhat darkly humorous, perfectly capturing this film's very bizarre and twisted tone. And then you got the parade chaos, which actually comes before the human turkey stuff. During the Thanksgiving parade, Carver decapitates a mascot and sets off these smoke bombs, which creates a scene of chaos, both thrilling and absurd. It's a bit too disturbing for me, given that most of this stuff happens in front of children, and a specific scene where the grandpa who's driving this vehicle for the float dies in front of his grandkids. Wooden planks just spears right through his face, and they're screaming. It is too much. Felt a little bit too Final Destination-y for me anyways. It reminds me of that part whenever, I think it's in the 4th movie, where that mom dies in front of her kids. It's like, I don't need to see that. Doing it in front of them is too much. That takes the fun out for me. Anyways, the last highlight that I included is Evan's death. Now, Evan's death, this is a good one. Shitty character, shitty fate. No, I mean, he didn't deserve that. I definitely think he didn't deserve Addison Rae. I think there was some redemption he could have had, but nah, the movie's just fuck it. And he gets his skull bashed in with a meat tenderizer on live, all on screen, practical effects, somewhat satisfying too. It's probably my favorite in the movie. The problem though, while the kills are visually impressive and steer mainly towards using practical effects, they lack emotional resonance. You don't care about these victims, and most of the time the deaths or situation themselves are ridiculous, so their deaths feel more like a checklist or a punchline than a gut punch. And then of course we have the twist. I feel like when it was revealed that Sheriff Eric is the killer, the audience is supposed to be shocked, but the film practically telegraphs the twist from the beginning. On a rewatch, he drops subtle hints with dialogue, or just the fact that law enforcement is so hands-on in a slasher movie for once should have been a big clue. Eric's motive, avenging the death of his pregnant mistress, is serviceable, but it doesn't feel compelling enough to justify the carnage. Worse, the final confrontation between Eric and Jessica is rushed and lacks the tension it desperately needs. As rushed as it is though, I will say Jessica sneakily live streaming the confession was a pretty nice touch. After that, it's basically just copy and paste slasher cat and mouse antics from there, but it's not really enough. Then Jessica's attempt at saving the day using a musket to ignite a gas tank and engulf Eric in flames. Visually, it's cool, but narratively, it's pretty hollow. Nothing impactful or satisfying about it. And of course, in classic slasher fashion, Eric's body is never found, leaving the door wide open for a sequel that we are of course getting. Look, despite the flaws, and there's a lot, Thanksgiving has a strong sense of style. I hated this movie when it first came out last year, but I've come to find a few good qualities that it holds. The fall season being perfectly showcased, followed by the small town setting, combined with the killer's pilgrim mask, gives the film a distinct visual identity. Roth also does a great job at capturing the chaos of Black Friday in the opening scene, turning consumerism into a bloodbath that feels uncomfortably plausible in today's society. The movie also clearly knows what it is. I'd say whereas Scream parodied slashers, this movie is like a parody of Scream, just not as far as Scary Movie. The film and its killer, subject matter, all that are serious, but the vibe and characters and just some situations feel so unserious that you can't help but be amused at the film's self-awareness. What doesn't work though in this movie is the substance. Not the movie, The Substance, that stars Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. That movie was phenomenal. This movie has no substance, which is fine, I guess, since most slashers aren't known for having the substance to match the style, but having any would have sufficed. The biggest issue with Thanksgiving is its lack of depth. The film wants to be a straight-faced slasher, but also a satire of a slasher and a satire of consumerism, but it doesn't fully commit to either of those ideas. The tone is also all over the place too, and obviously zero scares unless you count jump scares. The killer's identity is lackluster and predictable, while the characters are too shallow to carry the emotional weight of the story. The gore is fun, and there are some genuinely amusing moments or tense kills, but it's just not enough to save the film from its one-dimensional characters, uneven pacing, familiar premise, and predictable twists. What the fuck was that? Okay. Anyways, look, I'd say the bottom line is that Eli Roth's Thanksgiving is a film that tries to do a lot, but ends up delivering very little. It's gory, it's stylish, and it has moments of fun, but it's also shallow, predictable, and devoid of any real scares. Horror fans looking for mindless bloodshed might enjoy the ride, but those hoping for a fresh take on the genre will leave the table hungry and absolutely desire no leftovers. As far as my rating goes though, I was fully prepared to give this movie a 1.5, 2 stars out of 5, but after rewatching it last night, I can't explain it, but for some reason, I want to give this movie a 3 out of 5. Would I recommend it? Only if you're a diehard Eli Roth fan, or if you want some gruesome inspiration for next year's Thanksgiving decorations. I'm just kidding, don't do that. This movie's also, if you're into like the Terrifier movies and like that kind of gore, it's not as extreme here, but there is still that level of like, okay, that was more than a stab. Also, if you like Scream and stuff, odds are you're probably gonna have a fun time with this one. At the end of the day, it really is just a fun, cheesy whodunit slasher movie, so I'm not gonna be too hard on it as I initially was. You're gonna have a fun time with this one regardless, and I can say at the very least, you'll probably never be bored. Alright, well that about wraps up this review. Recap? Review? I don't know what to call it. This movie came out like a year ago, but I guess now is a better time than never. Normally I would have more to say, you guys know that I love to yap, but I'm immediately heading into my next video, which is going to be about Wicked, and that movie was nearly 3 hours, so editing this next review is gonna be no joke. As always, thank you guys so much for your support. I would not be here without y'all. I hope all of you guys have a great turkey day. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.